I want to tell you about Michael. Just last week, I watched him sit in his car for 15 minutes after another failed date, staring at his steering wheel, wondering what went wrong. Again, he'd done everything right, opened doors, listened attentively, paid for dinner, sent thoughtful texts, yet there he was, alone again, with those familiar words echoing in his head. You're such a nice guy, but those words, they sound like a compliment, don't they? But they cut deeper than any insult, because what they really mean is you're not enough. I see heads nodding. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you've been Michael, maybe you are Michael. Nice guys finish last. We dismiss it as a cliche, but like many cliches, it contains a painful truth. Not because being nice is wrong, but because what we've come to define as nice is often a pale imitation of true goodness. It's a mask we wear to avoid rejection. Shield we hide behind to protect ourselves from the world's judgment. I remember sitting across from a successful CEO in his office, surrounded by awards and accolades. He looked at me with tired eyes and confessed, I've spent my entire life being nice. I say yes to everything. I never rocked the boat. I'm successful by every measure, but I feel like a fraud. Like I'm still that kid in the schoolyard who just wanted everyone to like. That's the problem with nice. Nice is safe. Nice is comfortable. Nice is mediocre. Nice is what happens when we trade our authenticity for approval, when we sacrifice our truth for temporary peace. Nice men don't finish last because they're good people. They finish last because they've forgotten who they really are. Think about it. And when was the last time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace? When did you last say yes, when every fiber of your being wanted to say no? When did you last smile and nod while a piece of your soul withered away? Let me share something personal. In my early 30s, I was the quintessential nice guy. I pride myself on never making waves, never causing conflict. I was everybody's friend, everybody's confidant, everybody's emotional support system, and I was miserable. My relationships were superficial, my career was stagnant, and my self-respect was hanging by a thread. One day, my mentor asked me a question that changed everything. What are you so afraid of? Simple words, but they hit me like a thunderbolt. What was I afraid of? Rejection, disapproval, conflict. Yes, all of those things. But mostly, I was afraid of my own power. Afraid of what might happen if I stopped being nice and started being real. You see, true strength isn't about domination or aggression. It's not about being unkind or cruel. True strength is about authenticity. It's about standing in your truth, even when that truth makes others uncomfortable. It's about having the courage to say no, to set boundaries, to disappoint people sometimes. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to be honest. Every great leader, every person who's made a real difference in the world has had to disappoint someone along the way. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't nice. He was righteous. Gandhi wasn't nice. He was principled. Mother Teresa wasn't nice. She was loving. There's a world of difference between being nice and being good. Nice is transactional. Nice expects something in return. Nice says, if I do this for you, you'll like me, right? Nice is the currency of the insecure, the language of those who don't believe they have inherent worth. Nice is the mask we wear when we're afraid to show our real face. But here's the truth that changed my life, and I believe it can change yours. You don't have to earn the right to exist. You don't have to earn the right to take up space in this world. You don't have to earn the right to have opinions, needs, or boundaries. You were born worthy. Let that sink in for a moment. You were born worthy. The real tragedy of nice men isn't that they finish last. It's that they never truly start. They never step into the arena of life as their authentic selves. They never experience the exhilarating freedom of saying, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is where I stand. That CEO I mentioned earlier. He started crying in his office that day, not because he was sad, but because for the first time in decades, he felt seen. He realized he wasn't alone in his struggle. And more importantly, he realized it wasn't too late to change. It was the beautiful truth. It's never too late to stop being nice and start being real. It's never too late to trade approval for authenticity. It's never too late to step into your power and own your truth. Let me tell you about David, a brilliant architect who came to me broken and confused. He just lost a major project to a competitor who, by all accounts, had submitted an inferior proposal. When I asked him to walk me through what happened, his story was revealing. During the final presentation, a board member had aggressively questioned his design choices. Instead of confidently defending his vision, David had backpedaled, apologized, and offered to completely redesign the project to meet their preferences. I thought I was being professional. He told me I thought I was being accommodating. But what the board saw was someone who didn't believe in his own work, someone who valued pleasing others more than standing by his expertise. They didn't want nice. They wanted leadership. They wanted conviction. This brings us to a crucial truth. The world doesn't need your niceness. The world needs your greatness. The world needs your authentic voice, your unique perspective, your unwavering conviction in what you know to be true. Think about the last time you were in a crisis. Who did you turn to? The nice person who would tell you what you wanted to hear, or the good person who would tell you what you needed to hear? When the stakes are high, we don't seek out nice. We seek out real. I watched my own father struggle with this distinction throughout his life. He was the quintessential nice guy, always ready with a smile, never wanting to burden anyone, always putting others first. When he was diagnosed with cancer in 2010, he kept smiling, kept being nice, kept trying not to inconvenience anyone with his pain. It wasn't until his final days that he finally allowed himself to be real, to be vulnerable, to ask for what he needed. On his deathbed, he shared something I'll never forget. He said, "Son, I spent so much time trying to be nice that I forgot to be honest. Don't make the same mistake." This isn't just about business or relationships or success. This is about living a life of integrity. It's about the fundamental choice between being liked and being respected, between temporary comfort and lasting fulfillment. Consider the parent who never disciplines their child because they want to be the nice parent. Are they truly being good parents? Or the friend who never calls out destructive behavior because they want to be nice? Are they truly being a good friend? Nice men finish last because they're playing the wrong game. They think life is about collecting likes, about avoiding conflict, about maintaining a pleasant facade at all costs. But life isn't about being liked by everyone. It's about being deeply respected by those who matter. It's about making a real difference, not just making people comfortable. I remember counseling a young pastor who was struggling with his congregation. He confided that he was afraid to preach certain truths because he didn't want to upset anyone. He was choosing to be nice instead of being faithful to his calling. His ministry was suffering not because he wasn't kind enough, but because he wasn't authentic enough. The transformation begins when we understand that true strength isn't about being harsh or unkind. It's about being real. It's about having the courage to say, "This is who I am," not arrogantly, not apologetically, just truthfully. I've seen this transformation countless times. Men who stop saying yes when they mean no. Men who learn to express their needs without shame. Men who discover that their authentic voice, though it might not be as nice, is infinitely more powerful and respected. Remember Thomas? He was a middle school teacher who prided himself on being the nice teacher everyone liked. His classroom was chaos. Students walked all over him. His colleagues quietly picked up his slack. He was liked, but he wasn't respected. He wasn't making a real difference. Then one day, something shifted. A student was being bullied right in front of him. And something inside Thomas snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. He finally understood that his niceness was actually a form of cowardice. In that moment, he chose to be good instead of nice. He addressed the bullying firmly and compassionately. He set clear boundaries. He stepped into his authority as a teacher. The result? Some students initially complained that he wasn't nice anymore. But over time, something remarkable happened. His classroom became a place of real learning. Students began to trust him more, not less. They sought his guidance not because he was nice, but because he was real. When we stop trying to be nice and start being authentic, we often end up being more genuinely kind. Because real kindness comes from strength, not weakness. It comes from a place of self-respect, not I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped trying to be nice, if you started speaking your truth with kindness but without apology, if you set boundaries without guilt, if you made decisions based on what you know is right, not what will make others comfortable. This isn't about becoming unkind. It's about becoming real. It's about understanding that true goodness is stronger than niceness. True goodness has a backbone. True goodness can stand up to opposition. True goodness can weather disapproval. Let me share something that happened in a corporate boardroom in Chicago. John, a senior executive, sat quietly as his team presented a project he knew was fundamentally flawed. He had concerns, serious ones, but he didn't want to embarrass anyone. He didn't want to be that guy. So he stayed silent, smiled, and nodded along. 3 months and $2 million later, the project failed exactly as he had feared it would. When I asked him why he didn't speak up, his answer was revealing. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want people to think I wasn't a team player. In other words, he chose being nice over being responsible. He chose temporary comfort over lasting impact. This is what happens when we prioritize niceness over truth. We don't just hurt ourselves, we hurt the very people we're trying to please. John's silence didn't just cost his company money. It cost his team valuable time and energy. His niceness wasn't kindness. It was avoidance dressed up as consideration. The world doesn't need more nice men. The world needs more good men. And there's a profound difference between the two. Nice men avoid conflict. Good men address it constructively. Nice men say what others want to hear. Good men say what needs to be said. Nice men protect feelings. Good men protect principles. Nice men seek approval. Good men seek truth. I remember sitting with Robert, a talented surgeon who was struggling with burnout. He was working 60-hour weeks, covering for colleagues, never saying no to an extra shift. I don't want to let anyone down, he told me. But in trying not to let anyone down, he was letting everyone down, his patients, his family, and most importantly, himself. His niceness was actually a form of selfishness. He was more concerned with how people perceived him than with the quality of care he could provide. He was choosing the appearance of kindness over the substance of responsibility. This is where nice men often get stuck. They think they're being selfless, but their niceness is often deeply self-centered. It's about managing their image, avoiding discomfort, maintaining their status as the nice guy. Real goodness, real kindness sometimes requires us to risk being disliked. Think about the times in your life when someone made a real difference. Was it the person who told you what you wanted to hear, or the person who told you what you needed to hear? Was it the person who avoided conflict at all costs, or the person who cared enough to have the difficult conversation? I worked with a father once who was struggling to connect with his teenage son. He'd always been the nice dad, never setting firm boundaries, always trying to be his son's friend. But his son was spiraling, making dangerous choices, and dad kept being nice. It wasn't until he found drugs in his son's room that he realized his niceness was... The transformation in that family began when dad stopped being nice and started being strong. He set boundaries. He enforced consequences. His son fought it, raged against it, accused him of changing, of not loving him anymore. But dad held firm, not because he was being mean, but because he was finally being good. 6 months later, that son thanked his father for being strong enough to stop being nice. You saved my life, he said, by finally being real with me. This is the power of choosing goodness over niceness. When we're merely nice, we play small, we avoid, we enable. But when we choose to be good, truly good, we step into our full power, we become capable of making a real difference. I've seen this transformation in marriages, where a spouse finally finds the courage to address long-standing issues instead of just keeping the peace. I've seen it in businesses where leaders stop avoiding difficult conversations and start building cultures of authentic communication. I've seen it in communities where people stop being politely indifferent and start being gentle. The cost of niceness is often invisible until it's too late. It shows up in the opportunities we miss, the relationships that never deepen, the impact we never make. It shows up in the regret of knowing we could have made a difference if we'd only found the courage to be real. Remember Marcus? He was a guidance counselor who prided himself on being everyone's friend. Students liked coming to his office because he never pushed too hard, never asked the uncomfortable questions. He was nice. But one day, a student came to him clearly in crisis. Instead of asking the hard questions, instead of risking discomfort, Marcus kept it light, kept it nice. 2 days later, that student attempted suicide. The student survived, thank God. But Marcus was shattered. He realized that his niceness had become a form of professional negligence. That experience transformed him. He learned that real caring often requires courage, that true compassion sometimes means being willing to be uncomfortable, to ask the hard questions, to risk being temporarily disliked for the sake of being truly helpful. This is what I mean when I say nice men finish last. They finish last not because they care too much, but because they often care about the wrong things. They care more about being liked than being effective. They care more about avoiding conflict than solving problems. They care more about maintaining their image than making a real difference. The path forward isn't about becoming unkind. It's about becoming real. It's about developing the courage to be authentic, to stand in your truth, to risk disapproval for the sake of what's right. Let me tell you about James, a talented musician who spent 15 years playing in wedding bands. He was good, really good. But he kept putting his own musical dreams on hold because he didn't want to disappoint his family. They depend on my steady income, he'd say. I can't be selfish. But every weekend, playing another round of Brown-Eyed Girl at another wedding, a piece of his soul would die. One day, during a particularly soulless rendition of IMC, something in James snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. He realized his niceness, his unwillingness to disappoint anyone, had become a prison. He was living someone else's version of his life because he was too nice to live his own. This is what happens when we make niceness our highest value. We become actors in our own lives, playing roles others have assigned us, speaking lines others have written for us. We become so good at being nice that we forget how to be real. I remember working with a couple, let's call them Steve and Sarah. Steve was the quintessential nice guy. He never complained, never argued, always went along with what Sarah wanted. On the surface, he seemed like the perfect husband. But Sarah was miserable. I feel like I'm married to a ghost, she told me. I don't want a yes man. I want a partner. This is what nice men often don't understand. Their niceness can be a form of abandonment. When we're too nice to disagree, too nice to have real conversations, too nice to show up authentically, we're not actually being kind, we're being absent. Think about the managers you've respected most in your career. Were they the ones who avoided all conflict, who never gave difficult feedback, who always said yes? Or were they the ones who cared enough to be honest with you, who believed in you enough to challenge you, who respected you? I worked with a school principal who was beloved by his staff because he never said no to any request. He was nice, but his school was chaos. Programs were underfunded because he couldn't say no to new initiatives. Teachers were overwhelmed because he couldn't say no to parent demands. His niceness was actually harming the very people he was trying to please. The transformation began when he realized that true leadership isn't about being nice. It's about being good. It's about making the right decisions, even when those decisions aren't popular. It's about serving the greater good, even when that means saying no to individual wants. From seeking approval to seeking truth. From avoiding discomfort to embracing growth. From being nice to being real. I remember a young minister who came to me struggling with his calling. He'd built a large congregation by being nice, by never challenging anyone, by keeping his sermons safe and comfortable. But he felt like a fraud. I'm not preaching truth, he confessed. I'm preaching pleasantness. His journey from nice to real wasn't easy. When he started preaching with authenticity, some people left. His congregation initially shrank. But those who stayed were transformed. Real growth began to happen. Real community began to form. Because real connections can only happen between real people. Your niceness might be the very thing holding you back from your greatness. Your need to be liked might be preventing you from being respected. Your fear of disappointing others might be causing you to disappoint yourself. I've seen this pattern play out in countless relationships. Nice men who can't say no become resentful. Nice men who can't express their needs become distant. Nice men who can't set boundaries become doormats. And eventually, the very people they're trying so hard to please lose respect for them. Remember Peter? He was a talented artist who spent 20 years in corporate marketing because he was too nice to disappoint his parents' expectations. When he finally found the courage to pursue his art, his parents were initially upset. But something unexpected happened. They began to respect him more. Not because he was doing what they wanted, but because he was finally being true to himself. When we stop trying so hard to be liked, become more likable. When we stop trying to please everyone, we often end up pleasing the right people more deeply. When we stop being nice and start being real, we create space for real connections, real growth, real impact. I've watched men transform their lives by making this shift. I've seen marriages renewed when husbands stop being nice and start being honest. I've seen careers flourish when professionals stop being pleasant and start being powerful. I've seen families heal when fathers stop being agreeable and start being authentic. The world doesn't need your niceness. The world needs your truth. The world needs your authentic voice, your real presence, your genuine self. Because here's the truth. Nice men don't just finish last. They never truly run their own race. They're too busy running the races others have chosen for them. What would your life look like if you stopped being nice and started being real? What conversations would you have? What boundaries would you set? What dreams would you pursue? What truths would you speak? Let me share one final story. It's about Alex, a man I met at rock bottom. He'd spent 40 years being nice, perfect employee, perfect husband, perfect father. At least that's what he thought he was. He's sitting across from me, his hand shaking. He confessed the truth. I don't know who I am anymore. I've spent so long being who everyone else needed me to be that I've lost myself. That's the real tragedy of nice men. It's not just that they finish last, it's that they lose themselves along the way. They become so good at being what others need that they forget who they are. They become so skilled at avoiding conflict that they avoid life itself. I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about the people you most admire in your life. The ones who've made a real difference. The ones who've inspired you to be better. Were they nice? Or were they something more? Were they real? I remember sitting with a group of hospice nurses, listening to them talk about their experiences with dying patients. They shared something profound. In those final moments, no one talks about who was nice to them. They talk about who was real with them, who loved them enough to be honest, who cared enough to be authentic. This is the legacy of niceness versus goodness. Nice leaves no mark. Nice changes nothing. Nice plays it safe until the game is over. But goodness transforms. Goodness elevates. Goodness leaves the world better than it found it. Think about the great movements for justice in history. They weren't led by nice men. They were led by good men. Men who were willing to be disliked for the sake of what was right. Men who understood that real change requires real courage. I worked with a business leader who transformed his company not by being nicer, but by being more authentic. He stopped trying to please everyone. He started making clear decisions based on clear values. Some people left, but those who stayed built something remarkable. A culture of truth, of authenticity, of real connection. This is what becomes possible when we break free from the prison of niceness. We become capable of real leadership, real love, real impact. We become capable of creating real change in the world. The journey from nice to real isn't easy. It requires courage. It requires faith. Most of all, it requires a deep commitment to truth, your truth. It requires believing that who you really are is more valuable than who others want you to be. I've watched men take this journey. I've seen them struggle with the discomfort of setting their first real boundary. I've seen them wrestle with the fear of speaking their first real truth. I've seen them face the anxiety of making their first real choice. Not the choice that would please others, but the choice that was truly right for them. And I've seen what happens next. I've seen the respect they earn. Not from everyone, but from the people who matter. I've seen the relationships that deepen when they start showing up as their real selves. I've seen the opportunities that open up when they start living from a place of authenticity Remember Alex, the man who'd lost himself in niceness? He began his journey back to himself with one small act of truth. He told his wife something he'd been afraid to say for 20 years. He was terrified it would end his marriage. Instead, it began his marriage anew, because for the first time his wife was actually married to him, not to his nice guy persona. This is what becomes possible when we choose truth over niceness. Real connection, real impact, real. Stop being nice, start being real. Stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. Stop trying to please everyone and start being willing to make a difference. Because the world doesn't need more nice men. The world needs more good men who are willing to stand for something, men who are willing to be real, men who understand that true kindness comes from strength, not weakness. From authenticity, not approval seeking. Your life is too precious to waste it on niceness. Your gifts are too valuable to dilute them with people-pleasing. Your truth is too important to silence it for the sake of comfort. It's time to step into your full power. Time to speak your full truth. Time to live your real life. The choice is yours. You can keep playing it safe, keep being nice, keep finishing last, or you can choose to be real, choose to be authentic, choose to be truly good rather than merely nice. Nice men don't just finish last. They'd never truly live at all. But good men, real men, authentic men, they don't worry about where they finish. They're too busy making a real difference in the world. The world is waiting for your real self. Your family is waiting for your real presence. Your life is waiting for your real participation. I ask you, what's your first step? What small act of truth will begin your journey from nice to real? What piece of yourself will you reclaim to? Because the time for nice is over, the time for real has come. And your real life, or your real impact, your real purpose is waiting for you on the other side of nice. The choice is yours, and the time is now. For Michael, who's still sitting in his car wondering what's wrong with him, nothing is wrong with you. You just haven't given the world your real self yet. For David, who lost that contract because he was too nice to stand in his truth, your next masterpiece is waiting for you to believe in it. For James, still playing IMCA weddings, your real music is waiting to be heard. Your real life is waiting. Not a nice life, not a safe life, but a real life, a life of impact, a life of purpose, a life of truth. Are you ready to choose it?